Complacency is the enemy. Compassion is the catalyst. They call it troublemaking. We call it the blueprint. Welcome to the Unapologetic Disruptor for Good, the podcast for the restless, the relentless, and the ones too loud to be ignored. We aren't asking for permission to change the world. We're just doing it. My name is Matthew Portel, and I am the host of the Unapologetic Disruptor for Good podcast. Let's get uncomfortable. All right, here we are again with the Unapologetic Disruptor for Good podcast. This is episode 2.3 of the relaunch of the podcast. Very excited to be back and doing what it is I love to do, which is talking to incredible people, learning, sharing my own lived and professional experience, and listening to experts in this field of disruption of archaic ideas around, especially within education, but not just education, to be quite honest, just life in general, of what can we do a little bit differently, given that we're living in experiences that nobody's ever had. Why? Because we're living in the current, right? You can't predict the future necessarily. And there has been a lot going on in our world for sure. And as most of you are aware, I am back to being an elementary school principal of a school with nearly 600 students and about almost 80 staff members. So I'm in it and live it every day. And I will tell you, I love it. I love what I do. It doesn't make it easy. Right before we got on live here with the guest, we were talking about multiple things can hold truth at the same time. And I will say being a principal is extremely challenging and extremely rewarding at the same time. And there's some days that those don't coexist. Sometimes it's extremely challenging and it doesn't feel as rewarding. And there's some days it feels rewarding and not so much of a challenge. So I certainly live in that space of multiple things can be true at the same time. But I am really excited to be back with the podcast, and we are rolling now pretty consistently. And I was checking to see how many people were listening, because I know it's been over a year since I had recorded. And let me tell you, it's jumped right back up to the multiple thousands per episode. And let me tell you, to the listeners out there, I'm really appreciative and excited that you all have jumped right back in to listen, because I know that hiatus was pretty significant. But I also believe to do things when it's the right time. And it wasn't the right time when I came back to being a principal. I was investing my time, energy, and cognitive thought to the school that I was working in. Not that I'm not doing that now. I just have more capacity to do the podcast in a way that energizes me and to refuel me in a way that is both healthy and igniting that flame of being an unapologetic disruptor. And if you don't know, I know it's back here. I'm going to sort of point to it. Sorry if you're listening, you can't see me on the podcast. But if you were to watch this live, you'll see right behind me is that fancy little book on my virtual bookshelf. But in real life, it's right here. It is Reducing Stress in Schools, Restoring Connection and Community, with several friends and myself got together and said, let's write a book. And so we did that with Harvard Education Press. And I'm very proud of the work in here. And it is real life, real lived scenarios and experiences with the ability to use this as a book study with the school, with community organizations, with anyone who really wants to think about what we can do differently within schools. So that Reducing Stress in Schools is out there. We were really excited that Harvard put us on one of the top selling books from Harvard last year, which was very exciting. And even more exciting is our second book with some of the same authors, co-authors, is going to be coming out in the fall through Teacher College Press at Columbia University, where we're talking about equity-centered Tier 3 interventions specifically for elementary school students. And so if you're like, oh man, that's something that I need to know more about. And let me tell you, as a principal currently now, I'm still learning in that space. By no means have we figured it all out, but there are a lot of things that we have figured out. And as an incredible author team, we put them into a new book to help schools, especially around the tiered MTSS model, and especially that tier 3 support for students who struggle and need that additional support. So keep a lookout for that in the fall, because it is coming and we are excited. We just saw the cover and I will say it's super cool. And so I'm excited to see that on the shelves. And hopefully I can give you all some discount code when it is printed and ready to come out. It's not quite there yet, but hopefully we can do that. So enough about me, because this isn't about me. This is really about all of us learning together and getting guests here who not only share expertise, but they share their lived experiences and they share their professional experiences and they bring their own knowledge. And my guest today is going to bring all of that. And she, like the other two guests that have already been on, she's been on the podcast, but it's been a couple years. And so I cannot wait for you to hear from Beth Tyson. She is a childhood trauma therapist, a children's book author, the founder of Beth Tyson Trauma Consulting. She creates trauma-informed trainings, curriculum, and tools to help prevent and heal childhood trauma. She serves as a co-chair of the Pennsylvania Child Abuse Prevention Team. She volunteers as a CASA. And most importantly, she is a mom who is trying her best to break the cycle of trauma in her family. So Beth, welcome. So excited to have you back. Tell us a little bit more about you and the Beth story.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be back. Last time was such a great experience that I'm just honored to be here again. So thank you for the opportunity. Two things. Number one, your new intro is amazing. Your intro is so good. The music and the words, I love it. And number two, congrats on both of your books. That's, as a fellow book writer, it's like putting another child out into the world. So congratulations. Well done.
I appreciate that. And it's like co-parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, I have to be honest, and I have to brag a little bit on one of the co-authors. If you don't know Dr. Julie Nicholson, she is, I call her the book wizard. I've never seen anything or anyone like her. She can take thoughts that you put down and she puts some magical brain dust on it and makes it cohesive in a way that I've never seen in my entire life. So shout out to Dr. Julie Nicholson. I hope she listens to this because she is a gifted book wizard. That's what I keep calling her. I'm like, you're just a wizard. I don't even know other way to do it. But anyway, tell us a little bit about your stuff, your books, especially your children's book and all the things that we just talked about in your introduction.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I need to know Dr. Julie because I am actually, I have a book deal of my own that is going to be called Trigger Free Parenting. And it will be for both parents and people who serve children. So not just for parents, but and I'm having trouble kind of organizing my thoughts and really getting it all down onto paper in a really like cohesive, magical way. And so I need to reach out to her.
I can make that introduction.
I'd love it. Thank you. So that's one of the big things that have been on my plate since the last time we talked. That book will be really about addressing, we talk so much about strategies and skills for what to do with the children, right? How to support them, how to help them heal. But we never turn the lens around and think about our own wounds and how they're showing up in our care for children. And so this book will be a guide. It's not going to be like heavy, it's not going to be a huge long book. It's going to be something that parents and teachers, educators, therapists can read rather quickly so that they can get the basic concepts and strategies and skills on how to help themselves heal their own childhood trauma and their own wounds, even if it's not necessarily reaching the level of, say, a serious traumatic childhood. They still may have pain, unaddressed pain that is showing up in their care for children. And so I just felt like there was a real gap there in the literature and in the knowledge about, okay, we know what to do with children, but it's still not working. And it's like, well, why isn't it working? It's because a lot of times our own stuff is coming up while we're in relationship with children that's not being addressed.
It's so powerful that you say that. And I have always said, if I could mandate, if I were the Secretary of Education, the one thing I would mandate is that every educator has to go through their own process to begin to um unpack their lived experiences. Because just like a parent, and I am a parent, I have a 15-year-old. He's every day of 15, and I remember when I was 15, and boy, we are a lot alike. And I've learned the things that I did annoy me. Isn't that interesting? Like, it's
Yeah.
that, like, I did that, and now he's doing it, and it's nothing terrible, but it's hard. But I see that same, my experience as a parent, because I had to unlearn a lot of parenting skills that were used on me, because that's just isn't going to be my parenting style by any means. But I correlate that to every day that I see in the classroom, that if we are, as educators, are not conscious and thinking about how we respond as opposed to react,
Right.
then we can not only re-traumatize, but actually traumatize maybe children that have not experienced things. And so I think that is such a powerful tool. And again, coming from a parent's perspective, it's a fight every day with myself to stay regulated, and okay, he's just trying to express himself, and I have to help guide what that looks like. So tell us a little bit more about, what kind of ideas are you really digging into when it comes to that? Because I do think that is a high need, especially with the high stress parenting that we experience now with social media and phones and constant access and all of these things that we manage as parents.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a real light bulb moment for me when I learned that, my own past could be impacting my present parenting. And it literally was like the lights came on in my parenting journey when that happened. And I had never really thought about it that way. And I just started seeing everything different from there. It was kind of like when you initially learn about trauma informed care and the light bulb goes on. It was like that for me. And I really love those light bulb moments for other people too. And so what I'm really digging into, again, is more of like a process, a framework for people who recognize that they are getting dysregulated on a regular basis, want to do better, may or may not understand where it's coming from, and help them sort of find the pain points and where they're pointing back to in history, so that we can address what those issues are, so they're no longer hurting us and our children in the present. So we're kind of going to go on a hunt, a treasure hunt of things in our past. Maybe not so much treasure, but you know what I mean. Like the book is going to help you think about the past and how it might be impacting your present and your future, but without shame, because I do these things too. And last night I was dysregulated with my child. I am not perfect at this, and nobody is. It's part of the human condition to struggle as a parent. And so, yes, there will be no shaming or blaming of any generation or any parent. It's really about, okay, we see the problem. We know there's a problem. Let's figure out what the points are and what from our past is showing up now, and let's learn how to move forward and what we can do differently now.
Because I am a science trauma nerd, a lot of the social media that I get into my algorithm is around these type of things. And I saw a child psychologist who was talking about this exact subject, and it was around, a lot of times we try to parent our own fears and our own angst into or out of our own children. And I was like, well, my son is a freshman in high school, and if he doesn't keep his GPA up, or he doesn't, then he's not going to get into the college he wants, and like all these things that swirl in my brain, that it's like, wait a minute, these aren't his concern. These aren't like internally in him. Now, yes, guiding him is important, and being a parent is important, and thinking about things are important, but a lot of what I'm doing is really looking at myself as when I was a freshman and going, oh man, I hope he doesn't do what I did, right? Or I hope he does what, in that case, I hope he does this, when really he's his own individual and he's his own human being, and what I did and all it really doesn't necessarily have to project onto him. It's more of keeping in that space of being open and honest and having great conversations, because he's the type of kid that he's pretty open with us. Like, yeah, dad, the kids are vaping, they're vaping weed at school, and hey, somebody came to drunk and whatever. We're having these open conversations because that's the type of relationship we want to have with him, because the world is real and we want to be able to be there. But a lot of our angst as parents come from our experiences, not necessarily the experiences of our children. And what you said, I'm 100% staying regulated as a parent is one of the hardest things that I can do it with 600 other people's children every day. Like, it just doesn't get me worked up. I've been called terrible names by other people's children that people would normally. I'm like, it doesn't bother me, but my own child can say something and I'm like, you just say that to me? I'm like, wait, no. Calm down. And one of the things you talked about is the difference between response and reaction. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's really important, especially from a parenting lens, for sure.
Yeah. So last week I was in Austin and I was at a conference there for the Omni Family Institute. And I actually did a 2-hour training with my amazing colleague, Becky Haas, who I need to introduce you to. If you don't know her, I think you might, but she should definitely be a guest on your show. And we co-hosted a presentation, and that was the title, how to respond instead of react with children in foster care, adoptive families, kinship care. And one of the things that we did was exactly what you were talking about, like these thoughts, these certain thoughts run through our mind that really set us off. Like one of them might be, if I don't stop this kid's behavior, he's going to be a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, who says who?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
if I don't address this right now, he's gonna spiral off a cliff into the unknown and never to be seen again. Like we
Yeah.
have these ideas, these thoughts that just pop in, and it's fear-based, like you said. But how do we slow it down when we have that thought and think, okay, that's irrational. This one moment or this one thing he's doing isn't going to decide the rest of his life. He's not going to be a failure just because he's going through a tough thing right now and he's 15, 16, 17. But we have these one-liners, right? That like come into our mind that really put the fear of God in us. And for everyone, it might be something different, like a lot of times for dads, it's that kind of thing. Like, if I don't correct this right now, he's not going to make anything of himself, or, because there's that pressure to be successful as a man and to, be the strong, whatever successful
Mm-hmm.
type. A lot of times that's, of course, what would you say, a stereotype for men,
Mm-hmm.
but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's why it becomes sort of common for some dads. And for moms, it might be something else, like, oh, if she acts that way, everyone's going to think this about her, that she's, something distasteful or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that really sets them off. And so we always have these lines in our heads that come across, and it's usually based on something that we went through as kids. Because the past regurgitates itself that way, and it's not our fault and it's not their fault. A lot of times we just have to reel it in a bit, and we have to know what those thoughts are to try and pump the brakes and say, whoa, wait a minute. This one incident doesn't mean that. I don't have to jump in right now. Or maybe I do need to jump in, but you have to quiet that loud one-liner so that you can discern what step to take next instead of just reacting out of fear.
And I think, especially for educators, being with kids all day long, right, and interacting with students, a lot of times I bring that home. Well, I do bring it home. Not a lot of times. I bring it home every day, right? And I have to be conscious about what I'm bringing home. And I do talk to my son about things that I experience at school, and he talks about things he experiences at school. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I think it's a great opportunity for educators to connect to their children in this space of like, hey, what did you experience at school today? This is what I experienced today. I did have a kid who was very upset, and and I got to help them calm down. It was so cool. I could see him being up here and calm down, and then hearing about his experiences. But I will say that being activated, especially when you're already feeling in that heightened sense of stress and that aesthetic load that adults carry every day, living in an adult world where we're trying to make sure all of the things are happening for our families, is
Yeah.
definitely something we have to be conscious of, because that is projected onto our children, right?
Yes.
And I know he was on here a long time ago, and my brain is not going to allow his name to come in. It probably will in a bit. But he was a West Point graduate, and he was an NFL football player.
Mhm.
And he quit the NFL because he realized his entire life was to try to prove that he was worth everything to his parents, because there was this bar of perfection. And
Mhm.
what happened was he actually had a mental health crisis and was like, I can't. And so quit the NFL, and he started talking about mental health, and what you just said about men being driven and having to do, that's exactly what guided his whole life existence until it didn't. And
Yeah.
then when it didn't, he had to reevaluate himself. And so I think about that conversation with my son all the time, because my wife is an engineer and we are both overachievers. No doubt about it. We're both very competitive. Like, we cannot play Monopoly because somebody will go down as soon as the rent has to be paid to someone else, right? And so I try to be very conscious in that space of, I don't want him to be me. I don't want him to get, of course, we have genetics and everything else, but I want him to be him.
Right.
And what he wants to do, I'm going to encourage him in a way that is hopefully less than stressful, better for his mental health and his happiness, his genuine happiness, because it's important, right? It's so,
Right.
so important.
Yep. Yeah, it's easy to get lost in that thinking of, as your child as an extension of you instead of a separate entity, a separate human being. And I think being reminded of that all the time is important so that you
Well, and parent shame is a real thing, right? I
Yeah.
put my parents through it. I got kicked out of college. I mean, I've been arrested. I mean, I put my parents through it. And to be quite honest, I think their pain came from their shame. It
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily because I was an unapologetic disruptor literally my whole life, but it was because they thought people perceived them as bad parents,
Yeah.
right? And that to me is such a powerful, that when you talk about, we're not talking about shame in parenting, we're talking about this true ability to connect and as family units and things, is so, so very important. Because I think one of the things that we kind of discussed before is this whole idea of rebuilding trust
Mhm.
through this idea of co-regulation to healing. And to me, that speaks to what we're talking about, right? About especially this idea of parenting and being more responsive than reactive. And
Mhm.
how can we use this idea of co-regulation, which I'm going to let you go ahead and define for our listeners that may not be trauma informed nerds like us. But how can we use these opportunities to really connect and heal, not just the kids, the people, the humans we're interacting with, but also ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So co-regulation, the way I define it, and every definition might be a little bit different, but it's really the idea that um, children are not born with the ability to self-regulate their emotions or manage their emotions. They're not born able to adapt to stress. They need to learn how to co-regulate with a consistent, loving, safe caregiver who is also able to regulate their nervous system, meaning they're able to adjust to the ups and downs of life. They're able to adapt to uncertainty or to difficult times. They may get out of their window of tolerance, but they're able to pull themselves back into baseline, you know, rather not quickly, but with effort, they're able to get back to their baseline. And so when children are in families with parents or caregivers who have never learned how to manage their emotions, they aren't, doing this co-regulation dance with children from the moment they're born. And really that's when it starts that early in life. I really focus on the early childhood years of care for children and preventing and healing trauma in the 0 to 5, 0 to 8 range, because that's when really the most critical period of brain development takes place. And so if a child is raised in a home where they don't have an adult who's able to manage their emotions and bring their regulated selves to the child's dysregulation, then that child is not learning how to self-regulate. So that's kind of a long way to say it, but we have to be in proximity with young children in order for them to co-regulate. And our calming presence and our ability to pull ourselves back to baseline if we do get dysregulated transfers to their nervous system. And I know that might sound a little woo-woo, but nervous systems are like, a loop. You loop into each other. Whoever you're around, whoever's in your space, your nervous systems are communicating to one another. Maybe not in a way that we can see, but I'm sure everyone on this podcast tonight has heard or has walked into a room and felt like something was off, or met someone and gotten a weird vibe, or the opposite, met someone and instantly gel with them and really feel safe and comfortable with them sooner than you would expect it to. That's your nervous system picking up on all these really subtle cues in the environment and the tone of their voice and their body language, and communicating back to your brain that this person is safe. And young children do this as well. They have to feel safe in order to co-regulate, and they need to co-regulate in order to learn how to eventually self-regulate, which doesn't really begin to develop until adolescence. And so we're expecting very young children to regulate themselves a lot more than they're actually capable of. And so a lot of my message is around really understanding childhood development in a way that's realistic, and kind of lowering, I don't want to say lowering our expectations, but having more realistic expectations of what children can handle and what they can't. And oftentimes we're putting them in circumstances where their nervous systems are just not capable of managing the amount of stress, stimulation, environmental, sensory information that's coming into them. And so we're, expecting them to sit still, and do a worksheet at 5 years old. And most children, that's just not developmentally appropriate. And they're not going to be able to regulate their emotions to do that activity. So that's a long way to answer your question, but I hope that made sense.
No, I mean, I think it's spot on, right? And I think the analogy that I've heard of co-regulation, it's bringing the other human into your calm instead of being sucked into the storm. And I don't remember who quoted that, but that is someone else's quote. It is not mine. But I do think that is really important. And anybody that doesn't believe in emotional or stress contagion has never been to a professional soccer game. And I will tell people, if you don't know what it feels like, go to a soccer game and sit in the fans section, right? With the drums beating and the people clapping and the chanting happen. You can feel the energy that is produced within that environment, or any sporting event, right? Then go during the playoffs and you'll really feel what it feels like, because that is exactly what it is, right? It is this energetic connective piece that we all feel, and it can be positive or negative, right? I've been in environments where I'm like, ugh, something just doesn't feel right in here, right? Or I'm watching people, and that's that whole mirror neuron idea of kids. Our brains are constantly scanning for information, and all of a sudden it's like when an adult feels like there's something wrong, children can sense it immediately, right? It's why children run up and hold their parents until they get the visual or a physical connection, or that mirror neuron action of going, this person is safe. And then that child may come out and may interact, right? We see that so common. I see it at restaurants all the time, where there'll be a child sitting at a table. And I don't know why kids always, I don't know if it's my beard or what, but they're always like just trying to look at me. And so occasionally I'll wave or something, and the kid will be like, and then I'll smile at the parent and I'll wave, and the parent will smile. And then all of a sudden the child will the whole time they're at the dinner. They're just trying to get my connection and attention. And it's funny how that works as human beings, but those are real. That's that connective tissue that we talk about.
Yep.
And especially educators, you come in and your stress levels are here. That permeates into the classroom. There was a study done in 2016, the Oberle study, where teachers did self-reported stress to high stress to low stress or no stress. And then they did a saliva swab of every child in the classroom, and they tested for cortisol levels. And guess what they found?
Mm-hmm.
Teachers who had the highest levels of reported stress, the children in the classroom had higher levels of cortisol, right? It is this process of being human, and this is what human connection is. It's both positive and it can also be negative in that space.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to add to that, I think that as we were talking earlier about not wanting to shame folks either, right? For not always being calm. I think there is a little bit of a misunderstanding around co-regulation that you just have to be zen all the time, right? That you just have to be this totally calm, unaffected person, and children will read that as really inauthentic, actually, and they'll trust you less if you're just constantly zen and just really sort of trying to be a persona of calm when underneath maybe you really aren't. So in the way that I teach it, I like to always say that co-regulation is about feeling what someone else is feeling momentarily, and then being able to pull yourself out of that feeling and back to that more calm baseline. So you are going to feel what the children are feeling. And that's okay. If you have a child who's very dysregulated, you're also going to feel very dysregulated. It's about the ability to feel that and then have the skills and the coping mechanisms to kind of pull yourself back down out of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll be honest, when I'm upset and children come, like, for example, we had children stomp a computer smuggled a computer to the playground, stomped it and smashed it against the playground. No reason. I mean, I'm sure there was some reason, but none of it made any sense to me. So
Right.
I was very angry.
Yeah.
And so when the children came in, I looked at them and I said, I'm very angry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take a minute so I can get myself back to calm so we can have a conversation. You're more than welcome. I've got fidgets there. There's a bean bag. There's a chair. You all can take care of yourself, but I need a minute. And I think that's part of that co-regulation piece is we don't have to always be calm. We don't have to always be okay. I think the point of being an adult and working with children is that we have to show them that it's okay to feel all the big emotions.
Right.
And just because I'm feeling angry, I'm not going to scream at you, yell at you, belittle you, throw something, scream, put my hands on you. I can be angry and I can just express that I'm angry. They can be in the presence of me getting myself back, and then we can solve the problem at hand. And I think as a principal, that's something that I use daily.
Yeah.
I'm really upset by what happened. And so I need a minute right now to get myself back so I can have a conversation so we can solve this problem. Because right now I'm not able to do that. And I do that with my own child. And most of the time it sounds like this. Harrison, that is his name. Harrison, either you need to leave the room or I'm going to leave the room because this isn't productive and I'm feeling frustrated and you're feeling frustrated. So do you want to leave or would you prefer me to leave? And one of us will leave. And then when we get down, I'll say, hey, are you feeling okay? Because I'm feeling okay myself. Can we solve this problem?
Yeah.
And sometimes it goes well and sometimes it does not. But that's usually my go-to. Like either you're going to walk away or I'm going to walk away. But one of us needs to walk away because this isn't being very productive.
Right. And I like that you give the explanation because it's not you're walking away because you're abandoning him or you don't love him or you're taking a moment of self-care so that you can sort of regulate yourself and lower the stress hormones in your brain and get your prefrontal cortex back online. Super nerd over here with the brain, parts. But That's so smart, and you're also doing something really incredible for your son when you do that, or for any child when you do that. Do you know what it is? I'm guessing you do, but if
I'm
you don't.
hopefully modeling. I mean, that's what
Yes,
I'm trying to build their skill as much as I'm using my skill. And to be
right.
honest, we're building skill together because it's not a skill that I mastered. I'm not able to do it every time I get angry or every time I'm frustrated. I'm still in the midst of building these skills as an almost 50-year-old man. I mean, it takes a lot of time, effort, and intentionality.
Yeah, for sure, and I'm the same way. I'm also learning and doing my best and sometimes failing at it, which is and you nailed it. Yes, you're modeling, you're showing him an example of what he might do one day when he feels totally overwhelmed and needs to take a minute. And now you've given him the permission to do that without directly telling him he has the permission. You're passing that down to him as a coping strategy, and there's nothing more powerful for a child than seeing that modeling from their parent or from someone they love.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it really is, again, this is not how my parents parented,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I was parented, unfortunately, with a belt in a hand a lot of times, right? And it was interesting because then later in life and before my mom passed, she's like, getting a whooping never really impacted you. I'm like, no, I would rather that than have to listen to something nonstop. Like, and it didn't change my behavior. Matter of fact, it made me more disconnected. It made me more angry. It made me more frustrated. It made me more ashamed of being me in all of the ways. So it is this cycle breaking of, because I've heard so many times, and I've even heard it said in schools. I've heard it in my school. Well, it worked for me.
Mhm.
And I don't say it out loud, but I do say, "But did it?"
Yeah.
Because I do see those interactions with children, and you do demand respect while
Yeah,
not giving it. And at the end of the day, that isn't how we teach respect, is by demanding it. We teach respect by showing it and
yeah,
modeling it and being an example of two things can be truth at the same time. The child can be disrespectful and I don't have to feel disrespected. There's
right,
two different things. And my philosophy has always been I Q-tip. I quit taking things personally a long time ago. And I think that gets to kind of the next thing that I would love for us to talk about, and really thinking about how loss and grief and all of those lived experiences that so many kids feel, so many humans feel, and how that can be an underlying to a lot of the things that we experience. And that's even with our own children, that
yeah,
loss of and grief. And that loss doesn't necessarily have to be a family member, although that is a major piece. It could be a loss of friendship, of neighborhood, of moving, of anything. Right.
right.
So tell me more about that idea of the loss and grief being the real culprits behind challenging behaviors and the way children cope.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So many of us miss this, and it's because we as humans and maybe in our culture here in the U.S. we don't do grief well, right? We don't do loss well. It makes us very uncomfortable. We haven't had a lot of that modeling to show us how to handle loss and grief, and as parents, we and caregivers, teachers, anyone, we turn away from it. We turn away from the grief that we see in our children, usually because we can't handle our own. Um, we want to squash it. You see sadness or you see loss in your child, the first thing you want to do is take that away with distraction or TV show or the next activity, and we skip it because it's something we've never been taught how to do well. Um, what I often find myself talking about is kind of what you said about it doesn't have to be a death or a loved one. It could be a move, a loss of a neighbor. It could be a separation, like when children are in foster care or kinship care. And so that type of loss is different than traditional grief and loss. And it has a word, it has a name. You've probably heard me talk about either on social media or on other podcasts, called ambiguous loss. And ambiguous loss is a type of trauma that revolves around uncertainty. So it's when a child is living day in and day out with the uncertainty of not knowing when they might see their loved ones again, or have a relationship with a loved one again, or be able to feel seen and understood by one of their loved ones. There's two types. One is called, or type one is a physical presence with a emotional absence. So this might be someone who is physically still in the child's life, but is emotionally unavailable for any number of reasons. Maybe mental health issue, maybe a substance use issue, maybe work related. They're just obsessed and totally overwhelmed with their job. It could be phone addiction of the parent, all different ways, but basically the parent is there, right? They're living with them, or they're in and out of their life, but they can't access them on an emotional level. They don't feel seen and heard by their parent. The other type is a emotional presence with a physical absence. So this might be a child who is in foster care, kinship care, or an adoptive family where the physical presence of their loved one is missing, right? They're not in everyday contact with this person, but emotionally, the person is still very present in the child's life. They're longing for them, missing them, worrying about them. All the brain space is being taken up with thoughts about when will they see this person again? Are they okay? And this is a common experience we see with children in care. And it's one of the most painful types of grief and loss because of the uncertainty and the no place for their minds to rest. This concept was created by Dr. Pauline Boss, and I don't, I don't want to take credit for anything that's not mine, but she has an incredible website. It's ambiguousloss.com, and she's written several books on the topic, and she's the chief researcher on ambiguous loss. So I encourage you to learn more about that. But yeah, it's really the undercurrent that we are ignoring when we talk about trauma behaviors. We're usually just trying to stop the behaviors, control the behaviors, mitigate the behaviors, and we are ignoring all the loss and grief. We're not giving them an outlet to express their grief or loss. We're not even acknowledging it. We're not even, saying, "Hey, you know what? I know Mother's Day is coming up. You haven't seen your mom in a while. That must be tough." Who's saying that? Who?
Mhm.
I mean, unless to bring it up, most parents and most educators would never broach that subject because they're too afraid that it might upset them more, that
Mhm.
it might, set off, a spiral of some sort. But really, that child is just longing for someone to check in on them for that and to acknowledge their loss. So,
Well, I mean, I think too, as a former foster parent, pretending that these things didn't happen to the
mhm,
children and they don't think about it,
mhm,
to me, doesn't speak to the truth of who that child is and their experience. Now, do you just talk about it all the time? No, but I mean, we had our two boys for almost 2 years, and we went through the process of them speaking to their biological mom every week to no contact TPR, termination of parental rights, right? Like we went through that process, and it's not like they didn't know they weren't talking to their mom. We talked through the process, and at the end of the day, they loved their mom. And I wasn't going to tell them they shouldn't, and I encouraged them to love their mom, right? Yes, did horrible things happen? Yes, but did they still love her? Yes, and I couldn't discourage them loving her because that was their mom, and I think that pretending like things aren't existing because they're kids as if they don't know it doesn't help anything. And before we started recording, I know I shared this year I've had the most children in care of my entire career. I have more children at my school in care right now than I've ever had, and that is a different experience. And some of them are perceived as thriving and some of them are perceived as significantly struggling. And you're right that in an environment that is school, most people just want to extinguish the behavior. That's it.
Yeah.
People don't care why. They don't want to know why. The empathy is almost turning into apathy of it. I don't care. It just has to stop while it's in here.
Yeah.
Instead of this empathetic idea of what could be going on, right? What could be happening behind it? And I guess fortunately and unfortunately, I always refer, those are my kids. Those are the ones I'm coming in, I'm checking with. I'm constantly saying, hey, look, let's go play Uno during lunch, right? Hey, I do a thing called Positive Phone Calls Home. I share it on all of the school's social media, Goodlettsville Elementary School. You can check it out. I actually call parents or caregivers and I record it and I get their permission. I don't share kids in care, obviously. But they get the same experience and being able to have that connective tissue of seeing them differently and calling and telling their caregivers, this child is incredible in front of them and watch them and their expression. Because some of them, well, I'll be honest, the parents or the caregivers about have a heart attack when I say, this is Mr. Portell, principal of Goodlettsville Elementary. I'm here with so-and-so. Do you have a minute? They all gasp.
Yeah. They're like, ooh!
And I'm like, I just need you to know that your child is absolutely incredible. And you can hear the breath come out of the parent. I've had parents cry. I have had parents say, nobody's ever, I've never had anybody call me and say these things, right? These are the connective tissues that build all of these positive experiences and relationships. Because I will guarantee you, there's going to be some kids that will never forget that experience. I promise you, I can see it. It is a core memory that I get to share with them only because I get to see their genius and I just call it out.
I love that.
You're an awesome kid. Because nobody ever told me that at school. I was the kid that was in trouble. I was the kid that was annoying everybody. I was the kid that wouldn't sit down. I wasn't the kid that I had a clicky pen and I would click the pen all the time. Right.
Yeah.
So having that experience is really, really important for all of the kids. That is very interesting. The ambiguous loss. It's nothing specific, just that feeling of loss. What a powerful idea. Thank you, Pauline Boss. I'm going to check that out myself because that's powerful.
Yeah, she's done incredible work, and I use her research and her wisdom all the time, and I just, she's like my,
Well, one thing I was thinking when you were talking too is, a lot of times when you think trauma, people, I don't know why, but trauma equates to poverty, right? And there is a correlation, but not causation. There are many people who grew up in a poverty situation who have unbelievable connective community relationships that are thriving. I have several that teach at my school who are incredible and grew up in extreme poverty, right? That just live full lives of happy and joy and have always, just because they grew up in poverty. Right. However, what you said is so true that people are missing the mark between being on phones, that relational trauma where there is no connective tissue to the parents at home because they work in full-time jobs. There might be a nanny. If they are at home, they're on their phones. Again, I'm not going to say I'm not on my phone sometimes at home. I am on my phone, right?
Guilty. Yeah.
It's true. However, I'm a terrible dad because my 15-year-old isn't allowed to have social media and all these things because we have these conversations on why and what happens to your brain and blah, blah, blah. Does he call me out when I'm on my phone? He does. And I don't, I would say sometimes I get mad. I'm not mad. Sometimes I get irritated because I know he's speaking the truth and I am guilty. Yeah. But we have to be conscious. We got to be conscious that we are present, especially in those moments in which our children need us the most. And it doesn't have to be a big loss of a friend. It can be moments that they just need that connection. And we have to be open and aware of when those times are there. Not that it's not every day, because it is every day, but those specific times when they're seeking that connection and where we have to be aware enough to be able to give it.
100%. Yeah, well said. One of the first prescriptions I give families when I worked with them is to do 10 minutes of special time a day with your children. Again, I usually am focused on the younger set, but it works for the older ones too. And it's not a huge chunk of time, but and I do it with my own daughter. I say, look, I'm putting the phone in the drawer, turning off the TV, whatever. No, just try to eliminate distractions and just spend time together doing something the child enjoys without directing them, without expecting anything from them, without any agenda. Just say, hey, what do you want to do for the next 10 minutes? You have my full and undivided attention. And that intervention alone oftentimes starts to shift things really fast. And letting the child know, like, you can ask me if I forget about special time, or maybe you're needing extra that night, hey, can I have 10 more minutes of special time, mommy? Or, whatever works. But I always say, like, it's okay for them to ask for that. Now they have the language, because a lot of times
Mhm.
children will try to get our attention with misbehavior, right? Because that
Absolutely.
works. It's very effective.
Mhm.
All of a sudden we're on our phone, or we're on the computer, or we're watching whatever, we're doing the dishes, we're busy. And I get that, but sometimes the kids start acting up the second we get busy, and then they get punished. But really, all they really wanted was our attention. And
It's
so,
that 2 by 10 that we talk about in schools, the research-based strategy of 2 minutes a day for 10 days.
yeah,
Just talk to a student about whatever they want. Have them come and eat lunch with you, whatever it is. 2 minutes a day for 10 days will change your relationship with anyone, not just students. It can be with peers, it can be with loved ones. Just talk for 2 minutes a day for 10 days about anything somebody else wants to talk about. And I know you've experienced it, Beth, on a plane. I
yeah,
don't know why, but people talk to me on planes. And I usually ask 2 questions, and by the time that I leave the plane, I know their whole life story. I know their grandbabies' names, their aunties, their uncles. I know their kids' names, their professions, where they live, where they're going to be going. I even have connected on social media. One lady, she's in her 70s. She was an artist from California. I'm like, I'm going to follow you on Instagram because your stuff is really cool. Right. Everybody is seeking those connective
yes,
tissues, whether it's a stranger or whether it's a child in your home. Those little pieces of connection are so important. This is why my son and I go to card shows, sports card shows. This is why I take him to his high school basketball games. This is why we go fishing. This is why we have breakfast at Waffle House when we do any of those things before we go, because it's that connective tissue. Somebody asked me a question. It was during the football season. My son doesn't play football. But he loves to go to the games. And his high school was in working towards to go to state championships. And they had a game on a Friday night, and it was 45 minutes south. And so I said, I can't believe you're taking him to a football game on a Friday night after working all week. And I said, it's 45 minutes in the car that he and I just get to talk.
yep,
It's not really about the football game. I mean, I do love sports, and I go and I will cheer the team on.
right,
But that 45 minutes that I get to have in the car with him and the 45 minutes on the way home
yep,
are as important to me as anything.
yep,
And there will be a day when he won't ask me, Dad, will you take me to the football game? Because he'll be driving himself, or
right,
he'll be in college and he may not want me to go. So I think all of those opportunities, as exhausted as we are and tired as we are, and everything that we have to deal with in adults, which, by the way, kids really don't care because they're not adults and we
right.
shouldn't pressure them to become adults. Um, those are the things that we have to make a priority.
Yeah, 100%. I love that example, because that's a memory I have with my own father. Growing up, one of the things when we would go on long car trips together, he would. Looking back now, I know what he was doing. He was playing certain songs that he was trying to,
Smart.
subliminally message me with, and we would have these conversations, and we were always in the car, going somewhere. And now I look back on those, and those are some of the most important conversations we had as I was growing up. And so the car, now fast forward to when I was learning about, childhood trauma and how to connect with kids who might be a little resistant to, or not trusting adults and not wanting to open up and that kind of thing. The car is so great because you're not face to face, and the child feels less confrontation that way, and it helps them feel a little bit more on even keels. So especially for older kid, if you're sitting, next to each other, driver's seat and passenger seat, you're next to each other. You're more on even keel, like even ground. You're not facing each other. It doesn't feel confrontational. So kids will say things they might not have said if you were sitting across the table from one another. And then another really great time, especially for the younger kids, is right before bed. And I know that parents are exhausted. I'm one of them at bedtime, but that is when I get the richest information and the concerns and the worries. So, having a time before bed to allow the child to share things with you, their defenses are lower, they're more willing a lot of times to open up. And so that's another sort of secret tip I always give to my families, is that if you have a child who's not trusting you and not able to open up, that those are two spaces that they're more likely to. I can't promise they will, but if you nurture that environment and give it a shot, sometimes it'll open a door that wasn't there.
I already told you 45 minutes goes fast, and actually this is 55 because we got talking so much that it just got away, and that's great because that means it's a great conversation. And it is at that time where we will close, and I hate it. However, you can always come back on as I've welcomed you back anytime. And matter of fact, maybe we need to do a dual one with some of our cool friends, Becky being one of them. Becky's been on this podcast before, and we have so many mutual friends in this work that maybe we just have like a friend reunion and we just get everybody on here and we just all talk. It would be entertaining at the least, but it could be educational at the most, right?
I would love that.
We've got some greatly brilliant friends in this work across the country and even internationally. So the one thing I'm going to ask you that I've asked everybody at the end is, how can we be disruptive for good?
Yeah, how can we be disruptive for good? That's a great question. I think we need to be fierce advocates for children, especially now, with so much coming to light about the vulnerability of children. We really can't pretend that things aren't happening, anymore. And so I think really we need to be fierce advocates and believe children if they share something that, someone has hurt them or harmed them. The statistics and the research all supports that children typically do not lie about abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, or any of those types of situations. And the research is significant, not just talking about one or two studies here. The research is significant that children on the whole do not lie about this kind of stuff. So I have to say that, given the world we're living in right now and all the issues we're seeing, that if you ever have a child who comes to you, it doesn't matter if their story doesn't line up. It doesn't matter if they told you something different yesterday. It doesn't matter if they told the other teacher a different story. If they come to you and tell you and disclose any type of harm, please believe them.
Oh, yes, 100%. And on that, I think that's a great way to end. And here's the deal. Go be fierce for kids. Go be fierce for your own kids within yourself and how you operate. Be fierce for the kids that you work with every day if you're an educator. And don't forget, please go be an unapologetic disruptor for good.